Hi, welcome to Made in the Low Country. My name is Stephanie and today we're going to be crocheting dishcloths. The dishcloths we're going to make are going to look like this. Let me move this basket out of the way. They're going to look like this. So you can see they're a good size and they have a little bit of texture to them. And we're going to be using 100% cotton yarn to make them. So I picked this yarn up at Goodwill for 50 cents a skein. Skein? I never know how to say that. If someone knows, please drop it below because I really don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But anyway, I found these at Goodwill for 50 cents a skein and there were about 5 skeins there, so I bought them all. And that's what I'm using to make these. And then at the end, we're just going to do crochet around the edge to finish them in an alternating color. And we are going to be using a size 8 or H or 5 millimeter crochet hook. And when I finish making them, I like to package them up. I just printed this on some cardstock and I just tape it on, I cut it out in strips and then tape it onto the back. And that way I can give them, they're great stocking stuffers. At Christmas, I like to make baked good baskets, and I'll also add something I make homemade other than baked goods. Usually I'll add some homemade soap, which we've already made in a previous video, which I can link below. But then I'll throw a couple of these dishcloths in there as well. So I just store them in a basket until I need them. And then here are the labels ready to go as I get them made. All right, let's get started. So just a disclaimer, I don't know if all of my terminology is exactly correct with crochet because I've never had a formal teacher. I've only ever been self-taught from books or watching a few videos. So if I say anything incorrectly, I do apologize in advance. The first thing we want to do is make a slip knot. So I usually just do it by hand. So I just take my yarn, wrap it around my fingers one time, make a cross through it, and then grab the center and pull it. And then if you pull the yarn that's connected to the skein, it tightens it up. Now I like to leave a little bit of a longer tail, so I'm going to pull the short end. So my tail's a little bit longer. And that's it. Let's do that again. So I wrap it around 2 fingers till it meets, and let it hang over the back of my hand. And I'm left-handed, as you can see. Then I pull my fingers out and just let it droop. I grab it from the center, pulling the piece that's the long piece that's attached to the skein. I tighten it so then I have a big loop, but we want to make it smaller, so then I'm going to pull the short loop. All right, and that's ready to go onto my hook. So I'm going to slide my hook through my loop, and I'm going to take the short one and just pull it, the short tail, and pull it. And now I have my working loop on my hook. So we're going to cast on. You don't count the loop that's on your hook. You never count that one. That's your working loop. So I'm going to cast on 31. This is how I hold my yarn. It just goes over my pinky, under my ring finger, middle finger, and then over my index finger. And we're going to wrap from the back and pull through the loop. We're going to do that again. That's 1, wrap from the back, pull through the loop. 2, wrap from the back, pull through the loop. So we're going to do that. We're going to make 31 stitches. So right now we have, let's count what we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, because once again, we don't count the one that's our working loop on the hook. So that should be 31, but let's lay it down and count it just to be sure. Okay, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and here's 31, this little last loop. And I always stop and count there because you want to be sure your foundation is correct so the pattern works out properly. So every time I crochet, I actually count throughout the whole project, okay? So then we're going to turn our work because we have to work from the same direction. So we're just going to turn our work. And now we're going to do our first row of single crochet into this cast on row. So we're going to go into the second stitch from the hook. First, not this one, but the second. So here's the first loop. We're going to go into, can you see that? So we're not going to go into this one, the first loop. We're going to go into the second loop right here. Let me grab my yarn. All right, and then we're going to push through. See how it has a center hole? We're going to go right in that center. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to wrap the thread around, pull through, bring up a loop, wrap the thread from behind, and then pull through both loops. And that's your first single crochet stitch. And we're going to do that. We're going to work all the way across. That's in that same manner. We're going to go through the center, wrap, pull through, wrap, pull through two. All right, we're coming up onto the end. Just have a couple more to go. And then we're going to check our work. We're going to count again. Now, because we stitched into the second stitch from the hook, we should now have 30 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and don't forget, see this final loop here? That will be 30. So that's perfect. Now I'd count. In the beginning when I started crocheting, I would decrease and increase accidentally or skip a stitch. So I've just made it good practice to count as I go. Kind of can be a little obsessive about it. So it's just good practice, especially when you're new. So now the next thing before we turn, we want to chain one. So we're going to chain one. And then we're going to turn our work. And this is where the pattern starts. So we've done our cast on row. We've done our single crochet to give us a good foundation. And you can see the stitches. See the little hearts or the little V's? Each one of those is a stitch. So that's what I'm counting as I count. So now we have this is our working stitch now. So do you see where the yarn goes through that loop? We're not going to count this stitch. This is not going to be considered a stitch. This is going to be the stitch that's on the hook. That's going to be our working stitch. So we're going to work from the stitch right beside that. A single crocheting in the front or the back and the front loops of each stitch. So we're going to start in the back loop. So we're going to put our needle right through here. And then on the next one, we're going to go into the front loop. And we're going to do that all the way across. And since we now have 30 stitches, we're going to start in the back, so we'll end in the front at the end of the row. All right, so let's give that a go. So we're going to start in the back. I'm going to just slip my hook underneath just the back half of that loop. And now we're just going to do a single crochet, which is wrap, just what we did before. Pull through and pick up a loop, wrap, pull through two. Now that was the back. And can you see how you can see the front of the stitch? So we know we have to do this front stitch because we did not do this front stitch. So that's how I always can tell if I have to lay it down and I'm like, uh-oh, what did I do? If I have two front stitches side by side, I know it's time to do a front stitch. Now let me do a front stitch so you can see how it looks. All right, so if I pick it up and it looks like this, there's no front stitch, I know it's time to do a back stitch because I just did a front stitch. So this will give the dishcloth a little bit of texture, makes it good for scrubbing. So it gives it the little bit of knots, the little areas that look kind of raised. So we're just going to keep alternating, doing that same single crochet stitch, wrap, pull through, pick up a loop, wrap, pull through 2 loops. Now let's see, can you tell which stitch I need to do next? Got 2 front stitches side by side, so I know I need to do a front stitch. And the more you do it, the more you'll be able to recognize your stitches. That was another thing that took a while. The hardest 2 things for me when I was a new crocheter was finding the first or second stitch from the hook when you turn your work and doing what the pattern calls for. So sliding up and down and seeing where my working stitch is and knowing that one doesn't count really made the difference for me. So we're just going to keep working across. When we get to the end, we'll count again. Be sure we still have 30 stitches. Now see, I stopped for a moment to pull more yarn. Okay, what did I do last? So I'm looking at it and I can see that I don't have a front stitch. You can see the back stitch back there. So I know now, since I don't have a front stitch, it's time to do a back stitch. All right, we're coming up on the end. Have 3 stitches left. So it should be a front, a back, and a front stitch because remember we started on the back stitch, so we need to end on the front stitch because we have an even number of stitches. So we're going to do the front, and the back. Sometimes that last stitch can be really tight, and then the front. Okay, let's check our work again. I'm not going to count the loop on the hook. 1, 2. Don't count that little knot there. This is our last, so we're at 30, so we're perfect. So the one thing I always do before I turn my work, I go ahead and chain 1. That way if I have to set it down right now, when I come back to it, there's no question. I know I've chained 1, so I'm ready to turn my work. So I've chained 1 and I turn. I go into the back and we're just going to continue in this fashion, back and front, all the way across. And we're going to do this for the whole body of the dishcloth. All right, so I need to count my rows. That's one thing I've never done. Everybody's dishcloth will be different because it depends on how tight or loose you crochet to make a square. So I think that mine typically are about 28 to 30 rows, and I think I'm about 5 or 6 in now. One day I'm going to get a clicker and count each of my rows. I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work and continue. Again, I am definitely not an expert in crochet. My grandmother definitely was, my great-grandmother, but she passed away when I was 12, so I remember watching her crochet, but I actually didn't learn from her, unfortunately. But I have made hundreds of dishcloths and a few afghans, so have a good bit of experience with just basic stitches. But I find these very relaxing to make. So I know my chain one is there because I've turned it, so we're not going to go through our working stitch. As you can see, the stitch that, again, the yarn, that was the hardest thing for me. I guess that's why I keep repeating that when I was a new crocheter. Figuring that first stitch out was so difficult for me. So I guess that's why I keep reminding not only you, but myself. All right, so I'm going to go into the back. And then the front. So how are you doing? Is it coming along? So the reason I've never counted the rows is because I'm just making a square, and the easiest way to determine if this is square is to fold it corner to corner. And if both of these sides match, then we know we have a square. So right now, when the top matches, this side doesn't match. So it's not square. So this is about how much more I need to crochet to make this into a square. So we're almost through with the center. And I'm going to check it when I get to the end of this row, because I think we're pretty much square. I would rather err on this side of it being a little too large than it being too small. I can't stand a little tiny dishcloth. I like a really nice size one. All right, so front, we're coming on to the end, back, and front. So this one's a little bit tighter. So can you see that? You see my little heart there? So I need to go right in the front of that. Add a little more tension. All right, and now let's chain one. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. And then we're going to see if we're square. It looks great. These ends, and we have these ends. So now we can finish off our work. I dropped my needle. So what we're going to do to finish the top of this off is I'm going to just do a full crochet through each stitch before I add the border. So being a full crochet, it just means when I say full crochet, we've been doing full crochet, single crochets, but I'm going to go through both loops instead of just one loop. So we're going to put it through not the first loop, that working loop, but the first stitch. We're going to go through both of the loops. Wrap it once, pick up a loop, wrap it, pull it through two. So we're going to do that all the way across. I'm going to just go through both. And the reason I'm doing this, if you don't want to put the border on, you don't have to, and this will finish the end nicely. Because I didn't add the borders to my first few years, I didn't add the borders around it. So I always just finished them off like this. So see your two loops. Let me zoom you in because I moved the camera. All right. So we just went through both of those. Now we have this one. So I'm going to just put it in the hole right underneath those two loops. Right, pick up a loop, wrap, pull through both. I'm going to do that all the way across, and then we will tie it off at the end. 2 more stitches, and then we can tie it off. We're done with this color. All right, and don't forget that final little loop. It's always the tightest one in the whole project. Go through both of those, and now we're not going to chain one. So the way I like to, you can cut a long tail and pull it, but the way I like to do it, this is the way my grandma did it, so this is the way I do it, is I just make it big. I just make that loop that I just took off my hook large, and I pull my yarn through it, and then I just tighten it. Now I know it's a firm knot. That's the way I've always done it. So now if we want to, so you're good if you want to stop here. You have a completed dishcloth other than weaving in your tail. It is done. You can use it. It's great. But to make it pretty, we can add a coordinating color around the edge. I'm going to do a single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. And in the corners, we'll do 3 stitches in every corner stitch to go around the curve. All right, so I'm going to put my hook through that first hole. And then I'm just going to, this is just a way, there are many different ways to change the color, but this is just the way I like to do it. I like to leave a nice long tail. I go ahead and pull my new color through. All right, so then I have that tail, and I also have the tail in the other color, and then I'm going to start working. So I'm going to get everything tight. I'm going to wrap. I'm going to do my first stitch. Get everything tight. I'm going to reach through there again, wrap, pull through, pull up 2 loops, pull through both. All right. Just going to be sure everything's tight. All right, so now I'm going to go through and just do a single crochet through both loops, not singly like I did earlier. And I'm going to hold these 2 tails, and then they will get woven in as I go. So go through, wrap around, pull up 2 loops, wrap around, pull through both. So I'm just going to go through every single loop, holding those tails. It's a little awkward, but it'll save you from having to go back and do that in a little bit. So there's your coordinating thread or yarn. Pull some extra yarn up. I'm going to go ahead and get to the corner, and then I'll show you what I mean by the 3 stitches in the corner. Okay, so now we're at this corner. We just did our very last stitch. So now we're going to go through the 2 loops. We're going to do 3 stitches through those 2 loops. So this is the first. We get a little bit more thread, yarn. All right, see where we just went in? You can see the yarn. So we're going to go in that hole again. That's 2, and then we're going to do it one more time. I went ahead and turned it. And that just takes you nicely, gives you a nicely rounded corner. See how good that looks? All right, so this side looks a little bit different. So we're just going to stitch in every single hole that we see. That's yours. See all the holes? If you're a tighter crocheter, you might have to stretch it a little bit. But you can see with mine all the different stitches. Just kind of have to pull it a little bit. So we're just going to do a single crochet. Some of them will only have one because the sides are different. Some of them, every other stitch will only have one piece of yarn. See how that only has one? It's not a double loop. But then the next one that I go in has two. Looks like a regular crochet stitch. All right, when I get to this corner, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do 3 stitches in the corner, and then we're going to finish going around. Let me do this one, and then I'll be in the corner. Okay. So, well, you know what? That is the corner. So I am 2, 3. Now we're back around. We're going to keep going all the way around, and I'll meet you back at the end. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through both loops, and then we're going to go through each individual one on this side, and then I'll meet you when it's time to finish it off. All right, everyone, we are coming up to the end of our dishcloth. I hope that you were able to successfully make one with me today. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to drop them below. Okay, so we're back to the final loop. Remember, when we added the color, we only did 1 stitch, so we need to do 2 more stitches to finish off that corner. And then again, I'm going to do my big loop and bring my ball of yarn through it. Pull it. And I'll make a nice long tail, and I'll use a darning needle. And I'll use a darning needle to run my yarn through. And I'll just weave these ends right into all of my stitches like this. I'll just go in and out, in and out, in and out. I hope you're able to complete your dishcloth. They make wonderful gifts. They're actually a useful gift. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day. See you next time.